The LEGO Pirate theme is returning once again, and it might be in one of the most historically grounded and accurate pirate ships we've ever seen before. The Armada Galleon Esperanza isn't just another generic pirate vessel loaded with cannons and treasure chests, but in fact is based on the Imperial Armada faction from the classic pirate theme of 1996, which was inspired by the Spanish conquistadors of the 16th and 17th centuries. The Esperanza is legendary across the seas for the sheer amount of gold it transports back to their base of operations, and because of that, the ship is loaded with weaponry to fend off pirates brave enough to try and raid it. I really love this concept because treasure galleons have always felt like a missing piece of the LEGO pirate world. We've gotten pirate ships, imperial warships, merchant vessels, and even ghost ships over the years, but the giant, heavily armored gold transport ship, that's such a perfect idea for the Armada faction specifically. And visually, it fits the Imperial Armada aesthetic almost perfectly. The deep red hull with gold detailing immediately makes it stand apart from the more blue and white European-inspired Imperial ships LEGO usually gives us. It almost feels more royal and religious at the same time, which is honestly exactly what you'd expect from the Armada faction. It reminds me heavily of the Royal Revenge from Pirates of the Caribbean. That is the lore and inspiration of the set by the designer BrickLink, who previously created the privateer frigate Fortuna. The Esperanza comes in at 3,993 pieces, which places it among some of the largest LEGO pirate ships we've ever received. You get also somewhere between 13 and 14 minifigures depending on what the final version is going to have, which honestly feels appropriate here because unlike the Fortuna, the ship feels less like a military frigate loaded with crew and more like a floating treasure fortress. The focus is clearly on the ship itself, the gold cargo, and the atmosphere of the Imperial Armada. And from the looks of it, there's not a lot of wasted space here. Every section feels layered with detail, rigging, cannons, cargo, or even interior structures. On the outside, the Esperanza immediately captures that classic galleon silhouette in a way LEGO rarely attempts. Most LEGO ships tend to lean into the sleeker frigate or pirate sloop look because they're easier to translate into bricks. Galleons are difficult. They're bulky, tall, awkwardly proportioned ships with towering stern castles and heavy hulls, and somehow this build manages to make all of that look very good and elegant. The stern is probably my favorite part of the entire build itself. The layered gold detailing against the dark red hull is absolutely perfect and instantly reminds me of classic Imperial Armada iconography from the 1990s, just scaled up dramatically. The hull shaping also deserves a lot of credit. From the side profile, the ship has that heavy, rounded belly that real treasure galleons had because they were designed to carry enormous amounts of cargo across oceans rather than purely function as warships. It feels sturdy and weighted in a way many LEGO ships simply just don't. One thing I really appreciate is that despite the scale, the rigging doesn't feel overwhelmingly cluttered. Sometimes large LEGO ships can start looking visually messy once all the ropes and masts go up, and even cloth sails for that matter. But here, the clean white sails and dark rigging contrast beautifully against the red hull. And then there are the gun ports. Seeing those rows of red cannon flaps lining the side of the hull immediately sells the idea that this is an armed treasure carrier prepared for combat at any moment. The designer also included a working mechanism that allows the cannons to run out from the sides of the ship itself, which is such a cool feature because it makes the vessel feel alive rather than static, and being able to display it with the cannons out and deployed or closed is such a nice touch. And I love these dual winding staircases that lead up to the steering. I can already imagine this sitting next to Eldorado Fortress or facing off against the frigate Fortuna in a massive display set up on a shelf. Once you start opening the ship up though, that's where the scale really begins to justify itself. One of the biggest issues with LEGO ships historically is that they often look fantastic from the outside, but barely allow minifigures to function naturally inside. The designer specifically mentioned a priority to making sure minifigures can actually stand below deck comfortably, and that alone already puts this ahead of many official LEGO sets. The gun deck is fully accessible and packed with detail, with rows of cannons lining the sides while the massive treasure hold sits in the center filled with tons of gold. And honestly, that treasure hold might be my favorite interior feature in the entire build, because it finally delivers on the fantasy that the Imperial Armada always implied back in the classic LEGO era. These guys weren't just sailing around randomly, they were transporting unimaginable wealth across dangerous seas while pirates hunted them constantly. The great cabin above deck also looks fantastic. The dark red walls combined with the gold trim and printed map details give it a very warm and authentic feel. One of the coolest historical details though is easily the steering mechanism. Instead of using the standard LEGO ship wheel, the Esperanza uses a functioning whipstaff system, which is historically accurate for ships from this era before steering wheels were invented around 1699. And I absolutely love details like this because they make the ship feel grounded in immense authenticity. It's one of those details most people would never even think about, but once you know it, it suddenly makes the whole set feel even more worthy. There are also smaller boats included, removable sections throughout the deck, and a layout that feels designed for both display and storytelling and heavy playability. The minifigure lineup here is smaller than something like the Fortuna, but honestly we don't know what the final minifigure count will be, so we're just going off what the images have in them. I think that works in the set's favor though, because this ship feels more atmospheric and specialized rather than being focused entirely on a crew management system. There is a solid mix of Imperial Armada soldiers, officers, sailors, treasure guards, and crew members scattered naturally throughout the ship. One thing I really like is how alive the ship feels with the figures posed around the rigging, crow's nests, and deck. Some LEGO ships feel empty unless they're overloaded with figures, but this one feels active even with a smaller crew complementing it. Honestly, the Imperial Armada remains one of the LEGO Pirates' most underused factions to date. They only appeared briefly in the original theme in about 3 sets before disappearing almost entirely for decades. So seeing a massive flagship scale Armada vessel like this feels incredibly satisfying if you grew up with those classic Pirates sets. But the finalization of the exact minifigure torsos, like I said, could change in the future. When comparing the Esperanza to other LEGO pirate ships throughout the years, it really occupies a unique space. It's not as sleek or combat focused as the Imperial flagship from 2010, and it's nowhere near as fantasy driven as something like the Black Pearl or Barracuda Bay. Instead, it feels almost like a missing historical bridge between classic LEGO Pirates themes and something closer to a true museum-style sailing ship model like, say, the Endurance or Titanic. Compared to the Black Sea's Barracuda, the Esperanza is significantly taller and bulkier with far more realistic proportions. And compared to the recent Endurance set, like I've previously mentioned, the Esperanza actually feels more alive to me because it balances realism with that minifigure play much better. The closest comparison is of course the frigate Fortuna, as they were both created by the same designer, but even then, the Esperanza leans much harder into authentic galleon architecture rather than a privateer frigate set. It almost feels like what would happen if LEGO Pirates slowly evolved for 30 years without ever discontinuing. Now, if this set were to become an official LEGO set, I'd realistically expect it to land somewhere around the $350 to $400 range. And at nearly 4,000 pieces with this level of structural complexity, detailing, rigging, and interior space, if this set were to come in at around $380 or so, I honestly think a lot of pirate fans or just ship building and naval fans in general would still seriously consider it simply because there's nothing else like it currently available in the LEGO catalog. This is another generic display piece. It feels a very specific niche that LEGO has barely touched before. And unlike some giant display models that just sit there looking nice, this actually has functionality, interior access, and storytelling potential with loads of playability as we saw with the frigate Fortuna. The Armada Galleon Esperanza might genuinely be one of the most immersive LEGO pirate ships I've seen in a very long time. Not because it's the biggest or flashiest, but because it feels authentic to both real maritime history and classic LEGO pirates at the same time. The color palette is beautiful, the proportions are incredibly convincing, and the amount of historical inspiration layered into the design gives it a personality that many LEGO ships honestly lack, and goes to the testament of the designer for how much heart and soul they poured into this. And I think that distinction really matters. Personally, I almost prefer this style of ship over some of the gigantic, ultra-realistic warships we've been seeing lately because despite the realism like the Endurance has, this still feels playable. It still feels like something you could fill with minifigures and create stories around rather than just place on a shelf and never touch again. That a kid could actually play around with while sitting on the floor. And if LEGO ever truly returns to the Imperial Armada in a serious way someday, this honestly feels like the kind of flagship they would aspire to make. But this set is available to vote for now on BrickLink Designer Program Series 11. But anyways, that's going to do it for today, and I'll see you in the next video.